Greetings, travelers, and welcome to the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and in this video, I invite you all to join me around the campfire as I tell you my thoughts and experiences with Arkagis Revolution for the Sega Genesis and the Mega Drive, which was originally released back in 2020. Developed by SICK and published by MegaCat Studios, this is an arcade-style top-down shooter that has features like a fully rotatable screen, 6-button controller support, a built-in speedrunning timer for all you go-fast gamers out there, and cutscenes with full-on voice acting. When I first learned of this game, I was very eager to give it a try, and I got the opportunity thanks to Duck Duck Games in Monroe Falls, Ohio. They were generous enough to lend me a physical copy of Arkagis Revolution to try out and review, and I wanted to thank them for their generosity. Duck Duck Games typically has complete inbox copies of several MegaCat Studios titles if you happen to be local, and they also ship to the lower 48 states here in the US. Their website is duckduck.games, so go check them out. Now, while Duck Duck Games was nice enough to lend me a copy of this game for review, they did not monetarily support this video in any way, and the thoughts and opinions I share today are my own. Arkagis Revolution is a unique game that really shows off what the Mega Drive and the Genesis are capable of on a technical level, and at its core, it has a really fun premise. But is this a game for you? Well, my friends, strap into your ARX-01 and prepare for launch. Let's head into the gaming wildlands as I check out Arkagis Revolution. Arkagis Revolution is a top-down arcade-style shooter where players take control of the ARX-1 and use it to lead a revolution against the United Space Colonies, whose forces have taken control of Arkagis, a Martian nation that seems to always be under some type of tyrannical rule. This game features 5 wide-open stages where you will be laying waste to the USC forces and finding your way through many obstacles and traps. Movement in Arkagis Revolution is unique in that rotating the screen is how you maneuver your ship around. This Mode 7 style feature can be a little jarring to get used to at first, but once you do, you'll become an ace pilot and spin circles around your enemies. And I've got to say, I think you're going to have a pretty good time while you do it. Arkagis Revolution takes place in the year 2612. The Martian planet nation of Arkagis has been under the control of a dictator. In an effort to overthrow the evil dictatorship, the United Space Colonies sent in forces to overthrow said dictatorship. However, the USC was just looking to take over for themselves, and once the old dictator was out, a new one took their place. His name is Victor, and he is the commander of the USC forces and now your sworn enemy. A group of rebels have been developing a ship in secret, however, something that can combat the forces of the USC and take them down. That ship is the ARX-1. Developed by Mika and flown by Lynn, this ship will prove to be the key to victory. So strap yourselves in and prepare for takeoff. It's time for us to answer the call and fight for our homeland. Arkagis Revolution has one of the best visual presentations on the console, and some may call it a technical marvel. It was very clear that the team behind this one really put time and effort into refining the overall package and stretching the console to its limits. For starters, the game opens with a very impressive opening cinematic. Everything looks very smooth and the animations are very crisp. While the design of the game's characters don't blow me away personally, I can see what they were going for, and they do make the world of Arkagis unique and solidify its identity. Except for Victor here. He just looks like my old driving instructor, the one who fell asleep and left me scared out of my mind driving down the highway for 30+ minutes. Anyway, once you start getting into Arkagis Revolution, you'll be treated with the thing that I'm most impressed with. Full-on character voices.
This is Len. Mission complete.
This is Ricard. Target located. We meet again.
While the voices have that Genesis Mega Drive metallicness to them, the voices here sound incredible. And the lines spoken aren't just single words and grunts, they are full-on sentences and conversations.
This is Lynn. I'm at the destination, awaiting response.
Commander here. This is an enemy warehouse. According to our reports, they're storing a new weapon here. Please investigate.
Roger.
It's quite impressive and really added to the overall experience. I really can't think of another Genesis or Mega Drive game that had voiceovers anywhere near this. Once you're in the game itself, the visuals continue to impress. As part of the core gameplay, the screen can be rotated a full 360 degrees. Not only that, any enemy sprites on screen will rotate as well, and it all creates a smooth visual experience. I don't think I even encountered any slowdown when I was spinning around taking out enemies on screen. It was that smooth of an experience. One thing that's not optimal here is the HUD elements on either side of the screen. It's not so much what's on your HUD, but how much of the screen real estate is taken up by it. The large HUD really gives the game a claustrophobic feel. I would often find myself running into hazards like enemies or missing alternative passageways just because I felt so cramped in my tiny little ship. You do get used to it the more you play though, but I was a little put off by it at first. Another low point for me here were the visuals and the levels themselves. They're all pretty barren all things considered and really lack any sort of real detail, but that's really just a minor gripe in the grand scheme of things. Your ship and the enemies that you'll be facing look really good and pop out nicely on screen, and really, that's all that matters. And to round out the presentation, I have to give a nod to the game's soundtrack. While it's not the best music I've ever heard, it's done very well and doesn't get tiresome as you play through the game. The music combined with some impressive visuals make Arkagis Revolution a standout experience. The core gameplay in Arkagis Revolution is pretty straightforward. You'll be piloting your ARX-1 through 5 stages with the goal to make it to the end and destroy the stage's final boss that's waiting for you. You control your ship with the directional pad, shoot your weapons with the B button, and you can use the A and C buttons to turn. It can take some getting used to, but the controls here are very tight and they are extremely responsive. It took me a minute or so to get used to the idea that rotating the actual screen is how I'm going to be turning in this game, but once I figured it all out, it was all second nature and I found myself to be extremely maneuverable. I will say though, if you're the type of person that rounds up to the nearest dollar when you get gas in your car like I am, it's going to be tough for you to play the game and have the playfield be off-center half the time. But the quicker you can adapt to it, the better off you'll be. One thing that I want to point out too, while you may be extremely maneuverable and always spinning in one direction or another, I never found it hard to hit enemies. This speaks to good game design in general, but it also speaks to the very useful weapons that you'll have at your disposal to use. You start off with your standard shooty-shoot weapon called the phaser. It's not overly powerful, but it has a good rate of fire. You can upgrade it if you find the right power-up on the ground, which will make your bullets slightly wider and more powerful. The next weapon that you'll find is the homing weapon, and I have to say, this one is fantastic. I think it's a little weaker than the phaser, but that does not matter. When you fire this weapon, your triangle-shaped bullets will hone in on your enemies automatically, even the enemies that are hiding off screen. If you just keep your finger on the trigger, you'll be able to take out enemies before they even become a threat or get a general idea of where enemies might be hiding so you can engage them or avoid them appropriately. I would consider this weapon kinda cheap if it wasn't so much fun to use. I especially loved hiding behind a corner and taking my enemies out that way. And in the higher difficulty modes, this weapon is almost essential. Now the last weapon you can get is a massive charge shot. This beast of a weapon can shoot through multiple enemies in a row if they're lined up right. While the charge shot is very powerful, it's very slow to fire and even pushes your ship back a little bit when you do fire it off. I didn't really like this weapon at first, but on the higher difficulties, I ended up using this weapon so much more. I would take my time in areas, move slowly around the rooms, and even utilize the pushback that happened when I fired the charge shot as a way to evade incoming fire. Plus, I would have multiple enemies follow me down tight corridors and obliterate them all with one shot. It was awesome. I wish there were more weapons to choose from in all honesty, but I think 3 is the perfect amount for this game. Each one of them requires different tactics when you use them, and it helps keep the gameplay nice and fresh. You do get to play through 3 tutorial levels, which are unskippable, which is kind of a bummer, and these will help you learn how to use each of these weapons in a few certain situations. Switching between your weapons is also extremely easy. You can either press the X, Y, or Z buttons on the 6-button controller if you have it, or if you don't, you can just pause the game and select them that way. Super easy. The 5 levels in Arkagis Revolution, while not the most detailed, are pretty vast. You'll find yourself in some wide open spaces, or you may find yourself in some narrow, claustrophobic corridors and rooms. The game does have a map that you can access in the pause menu or by pressing the mode button on your controller if it has it. While the map is an interesting idea, I never really used it. 9 times out of 10, I had a pretty good idea of where I was and where I needed to go. If I ever got turned around at all, it was usually because I was spinning on the screen too much, and that one was kind of on me. But the main reason I didn't use the map is because when you open it up, it's fixed to one point. You can't scroll up or down or zoom in or out, so the view itself was quite limiting. Each stage that you play through is often divided into several sections, which help break things up a bit. Each area sometimes comes with new visuals and background music, and it helped keep things from getting too stale. One thing that I thought was a little odd though was that anytime you move into a new section, you would lose all of your accumulated weapons and would have to find them all over again. I'm not entirely sure why this was done, but it was a little strange. I would find myself against the boss at the end of the stage with only my standard phaser weapon, and sometimes I would wonder why I bothered to seek out weapons in the first place. It's certainly not a deal breaker though, as moving into a new section does restore your health, so there is that. Speaking of bosses, the end level bosses on offer are sort of a mixed bag. Generally, all they tend to do is move around the screen and fire a barrage of bullets towards you in differing patterns. You will need to master the maneuverability of your ship in order to be effective in battle, but overall, these encounters are not that hard. The very end boss did give me some trouble though. It did take me a little bit to figure out the best strategy to deal with him, but once I stopped thinking too much about the problem, I defeated him in no time. Overall, the game was extremely easy on the normal difficulty. There is a difficulty slider in the options menu, and I encourage you to crank that baby up to 11 after you feel comfortable with the gameplay. When the game gets harder, you start playing differently and using different tactics to make your way through the levels. Bosses are even more erratic, so you can't just rely on strafing techniques alone. It was very refreshing and added some much needed replay value to the entire experience. Speaking of adding replay value, the developers added a speedrun timer that you can toggle on in the options menu as well. While I am not much of a speedrunner myself, I can see how this would be really appealing to some, so I'm happy to see this as an option for players. So when you wrap it all up, Arkagis Revolution is a game that I really enjoyed my time with. Not only is it a near technical masterpiece on the console, it is really fun to play, and you'll find yourself hooked pretty early on as soon as you get used to the simple controls. While you may find the game a little too easy and the hour-long campaign just a little bit too short, treat your first playthrough as your practice run, and then crank up the difficulty to play the game as it was intended. Don't get me wrong though, plowing through levels at lightning speeds and with little resistance is a ton of fun, but I know some gamers out there that are looking for a unique challenge, and this is how you get it. Of all the Genesis and Mega Drive games that I've played up to this point, Arkagis Revolution is pretty high up on my list of favorites, and I do not say that lightly. If any of what I showed you today sounds remotely fun or interesting, I think you should consider adding this game to your collection. So with that said, it is time to answer the call, dear viewer. Your homeland isn't going to free itself, and it's up to you to step up and take a stand. Suit up, strap in, and prepare to join the Arkagis Revolution. Thank you very much for watching my review of Arkagis Revolution. What did you think of this game? If you have any thoughts or experiences, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm looking forward to reviewing more from MegaCat Studios, so be on the lookout for more video reviews of their games coming soon. If there's any other games out there that you'd love for me to cover in a quick review, leave those in the comments as well. I want to thank you again for spending some time with me, and I look forward to having you join us in the gaming wildlands again soon. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.